everyone, welcome to episode 34. Today Mom's going to talk about discipline and correction and just how to address different ages and different types of personalities within your own family and what we did in our family. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Mom to share today.
All right. Well, we had a request for this from one of our readers, and it's a good practical topic that we all have to deal with and ask the Lord for wisdom about. And so we're going to talk about the different stages of your child's life, the early years from baby through toddler, and then the elementary years, and then the young adult years. So we'll hit some key attitudes on your part and things to watch for in your children's lives so that you can prepare them to grow in wisdom and stature and favor with God and man. With babies and toddlers, think of yourself as a good shepherd, following God's example of providing, protecting, and leading them through their days. And so there's a lot of oversight. You'll be consumed with their care and do it with a happy, loving heart, and you'll just enjoy those early years if you just kind of guide them and love them and protect them and provide for them. And then as they get a little bit older, into the toddler years, you're nurturing them, teaching and training them. And so I remember one of our children, they were just so happy and compliant, and I remember on the second birthday, I thought, what happened? They all of a sudden wanted a challenge. So I expect that, in some ways that's a good thing, that they want to be independent, but you can guide that independence not to be a challenge to authority by, like, if it's what they're going to wear that day, instead of you putting out their clothes, you can give some choices for them. And so find ways that they can have some independence without having to challenge your authority as their mom. Also, sometimes children will start trying to get what they want through anger and tantrums. We really didn't have to deal with that very much. In an earlier video, I talked about being at the grocery store with a cart full and my firstborn in the little seat on the shopping basket, and he saw those candy machines and he wanted one. And so how we dealt with that, you can look back over some of those early videos. I won't redo that story, but I took him home and we did some training, and then we went back, and you can be creative on how you deal with those kind of things. We decided to have once a week, we could give him a little coin to put in, like the M&M machine, and that was kind of a fun way to do that, but we didn't connect it with his demand with that. We had to correct him for that first. Another thing is never scold or discipline your child in public. That's embarrassing for them. Sometimes you can respond to your tiredness or try to come on stronger than you need to. Just know that it's not helpful for the child. You want privacy. You want to be able to talk with them, pray with them, and counsel them too. So be careful if you're someplace where you're not near home. Find a private place where you can talk and rebuke your child and deal with their behavior. And never scold or discipline in anger. Anger is not a tool that you want to use ever in the way you talk to your child or train them. So, because anger begets anger, your angry response is going to be mirrored by their anger in the future. So be careful with that. It's just very, very important to be calm. If you're frustrated and tired, go by yourself. Ask the Lord to help you to do things to discipline and train in a way that would be helpful for the child. You're doing it for their good and not to vindicate your anger, and that's so important. And it's never ridicule, put down, or call your child names. That's demeaning for you and your child. So that's not going to accomplish anything good, and you don't want them to grow up and treat other people that way. So those are some important things for the early years. Some of their initial challenges to your instruction and guidelines will need to be dealt with, but you need to do it with keeping control of yourself and doing it in a way that is training your children. Then in the elementary years, we're talking like 4 or 5 and up, you're their authority and teacher still. God has given you that place in their lives, and it's very important. But you're also going to start dealing with issues of the heart with this. I have a friend, and she had 3 sons, and they were this age, and she thought, boy, I wonder how I can make the most of this age. And she realized that it's easier to deal with issues of the heart when they're this age than when they become a little bit more set in their ways in the teen years. So she began praying that if there's issues in their heart and life that she needs to deal with, that God would bring them to the surface. And she said the next month there were quite a few things that came to the surface, but she didn't see it as a negative because God was giving her opportunity to counsel and train and take them to the scriptures and be responsible for their heart attitudes. So I encourage you, if you're brave, to do that also. Also, make sure you have clear expectations. We've talked about that in early things about before we went to church and visiting in the grocery store, and also have it be a fun reminder on the way to these events so that they are reminded and they know what the expectations are. And also, it's very important for this age child especially to have privacy. If you're going to be scolding them or giving them consequences, do it in a private way. Help them know that you're on their side, you want to train them, you want them to be successful. Also, let them know that you're doing this for their profit, not because you're irritated or upset, but you see this as going to be not helpful for their future success. And so that's important too. And lead them, and also after you finish your session, it's a good time to close in prayer. So praying with your child, hugging them, confirming your love and delight in them is important. And lead them in this session to confess what they have done. You be calm. With some children, it takes time for them to be willing to admit what they did wrong and that they knew it was wrong. So be patient. Sometimes with some of our children, I had to take quite a while for them to get to that point. But it's important because someday they're going to need to respond to God as King of their life, and you want them to be willing to repent and acknowledge when they have done wrong. And also, if they've hurt somebody else, they need to be willing to admit that. It's a very important thing. And so your session is not over until they come to that point. Use consequences that fit the occasion. Some consequences are lack of privileges, some responsibility, some saying that they're sorry to somebody else and making it up, whatever they did that was wrong, admitting it. So that's all of those things keep in mind, but do not use your tiredness. I'll just reiterate, tiredness or frustration or anger as any motivation for the discipline. Let them know that you want them to be successful and that's your goal. Then we get into the teen years. We call it the young adult years. And that's an important stage. You're still their parent and their life mentor, but it's really good at this stage to also bring in other godly examples and leaders that would be paralleling your training, so that they could be just have that underlining of what you've been teaching to them, and that somebody else can also validate. So that's important. When they're in the teen years, when they're babies, you control everything about their life, what goes in their mouth as far as food and all. But as they grow in responsibility and self-control and all, then they increase in more freedom. So in this teen years, it should be growing more responsibility and more freedom as they demonstrate that they have character and wisdom consistently in key areas of their life, like their friends and their activities. Also, have they shown self-control and discernment in their choice of activities and friends, and fulfills responsibility with a good attitude. Attitude is a big thing here. So it's important to deal with a teen to help them to know that your goal is to launch them into life successfully. And so you're not going to be responding in anger. You're going to be helping them be responsible for their actions and give them more freedom as they grow. And if they fail to use their freedom wisely, pull it in again and just mentor them some more and reaffirm that your goal is to help them when they're launched into life to be successful before God and for others. And freedom to gain more education. They might be going on to college or get an apprenticeship. Freedom to gain job skills and find opportunities to serve and develop solid relationships on their own, and to gain more resources so that they can go forward, maybe put money into buying a car and things like that. So as you can encourage them and give them more freedom as they have demonstrated responsibility. And eventually, regardless of how they're doing, you're going to launch them into life. And your goal is that if it's a wise son and daughter, you launch them into a life of God's blessing and guidance. And sometimes if you have a big family, you're going to have someone that's a bit of a prodigal, and your efforts have not been followed. And so what do you do about that? Well, you launch them, yes, but you launch them knowing that there's going to be some reproofs of life ahead for them, and that God is going to pursue them. And so you're going to do a lot of prayer for that child, and fasting and prayer sometimes, to help God steer them back to Himself. So those are some things that we have just kind of touched on overview, but you can chew on and talk over with your husband. Psalm 23, we talked about that early shepherding is a good thing to look at, how God is a good shepherd and how your attitudes and responses can be along with that. Psalm 1 is a good one to prepare for those teen years. And just going through Proverbs is a wonderful resource for the elementary and teen years. We used to do that for devotions, and we'd teach the Proverbs, and they had their notebooks, and with the younger ones we let them draw pictures of what was we were emphasizing in a proverb there. But it shows cause and effect, and so you want your child to know that their choices in life are going to have an effect, and you want them to have God's blessing. And God says, children, honor your father and mother, that this is the first commandment with promise, And it's in Ephesians 6, 1 through 4, it says that it may be well with thee, and that thou may live long on the earth. And that was given to the Hebrew nation of Israel when they were going into the promised land. And you tell them, it's because if you make wise choices and you have wisdom, life will go better for you. And also where it talks about provoke not your children to wrath, and like we said, anger produces more anger, but bring them up in the nurture. And I looked up the Greek word for that, and it's the tutorage, the education and training and correction. So that's the nurture, and the admonition is calling attention to, doing mild rebuke or warning of the Lord. So you don't use the Bible as something to knock them over the head with, but just help them to see that God has their good in mind, and you have an authority, and that is God, and you're going to do everything you can to honor God in the way you mother and love them.
All right. Hope that was helpful for you and that you're able to glean some wisdom there. And if you have questions or anything of that nature, you can, of course, comment or message us. And so anyways, thanks again for watching. Hope you have a wonderful week, and we'll see you again next time.
So long.
Bye.